I'm going to go ahead and have Penny come on up with me. We're going to tag team this for a little bit. We appreciate the Show Low Police Department. They have been super supportive. They believe in this movement, and they have been on board since day one, and we really, really appreciate it. And so I'm April. This is Penny, my colleague, and also my mother. So tonight, this presentation we call Restoring Social Joy, putting social back into family, not social media, but putting social back into our families. And so these are questions that when we travel and we give these presentations, these are some of the questions that we get. How do I get my kids to govern themselves with screen balance? When should I give my child a phone? That's my favorite question. I always have moms come up to me. So, just your opinion. When do you think I should give my child a phone? And I always have a two-part answer for that because I love flip phones. I'm trying to bring back the flip phone. It's a great starter phone for kids. And so I have a different answer for that. And then I say, if they're asking when should I give my child a smartphone, I say whenever you are ready for them to start viewing pornography, because they will. If they have a smartphone, they 100% will. It's not if, it's when. So that's always my answer for that. What is secondhand screen time? We're going to talk about that, how this is affecting our mental health, and how you can keep your children safe online. There are great apps and filters available to us. And before we start, I always like to tell parents that this is a shame-free night. There's no shame. We just haven't known until now. The studies are just starting to come in, and when we know better, we do better. We haven't known. We're going to educate you tonight. Also, sometimes emotions run high during this, and you're going to want to go home and rip out every electronic device in your home, and please don't do that. Take a couple weeks. We're going to give you some tips. Please don't go home and make crazy decisions. Wait a couple weeks. If you need to contact me, I'll talk you through it. It's going to be okay. So, these are the things that we're going to talk about tonight. I love to start off with this quote. Either we spend time meeting children's emotional needs by filling their cup with love, or we spend time dealing with the behaviors caused from their unmet needs. Either way, we spend the time. So, June 29th, 2007. Does anybody want to take a guess at why this date is significant in what we are talking about tonight?
Some kind of phone came out for the first time?
Yes! First answer to get it right. That is the date that the first smartphone came out on the market. And so it is a significant date because if you think about our world before this date and how much different it is now, it really is. This is one of the reasons why I do what I do. Since social media came heavy into play in about 2009, right?
Correct.
There's been an 85% increase in teen suicide. That's Arizona. So this is what's happening in our state, in our town, in our backyard. It's a lot higher in some states. In Utah, it's 110%. So tonight we're going to talk about why there's a correlation between these two things. And go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say that in the mental health field, at first we noticed the trends and we were trying to put it together with what is different in our environment. And we kept saying it couldn't possibly be phones, but
Right.
all of the data is pointing directly to that for various reasons, which we'll cover.
Correct, yeah. So we are working upstream from this tonight. We are trying to get ahead of this before it gets to this. And also, this is the new study that just came out. Suicide is now the leading cause of death in children ages 10 to 14. That just moved up to number 1 in the state of Arizona. The leading cause of death in our children, ages 10 to 14. So the statistics are staggering. So we're here to have a hard conversation tonight and to educate you and to hopefully send you home with some nuggets, some stuff you can do in your own homes. So it cut off my slide a little bit, but so this is what social media is. I call it a front stage and a backstage. Instagram, everybody, it's very visual. People put their best foot forward on social media, your front stage. So my front stage is like a really cute picture of my kids, or that my house looks really cute. And then over in this corner, there's like a mountain of laundry. One of my boys has his underwear on his head. My kitchen's a mess. But we don't tend to put those things on social media. And us as adults, we get that more. It still affects us, but our kids who have underdeveloped brains, and they're seeing these front stages, and they're comparing their front stages. They're comparing everyone else's front stages to their backstage. Comparing steals our joy, and that is what social media does. So we're going to talk a little bit about the brain and how this all correlates in.
Okay. So we have learned from studies that are coming out that all of our heavy media use is affecting our brains. Video games, which are bright and loud, and social media, texting to extremes. I know I hardly text, but our kids just send massive amounts of texting. We do know that that overstimulates the brain's pleasure center in the very same way that cocaine does. And so when we have all that large amount of dopamine present for long extended periods of time, it actually is wearing out the pleasure circuit in our brain. And what this is doing is causing us to not be able to find joy and pleasure in the little things in life, the normal things that, normally we do. So it keeps us on the they call it the super lane in our brain. And we don't go to the other parts of our brain where we need to have those developing skills for handling our emotions. We're discovering them. We're seeking that dopamine rush that you get.
Right.
So we didn't really know that for a long time. We see kids, when you try and get them off the video games, they will become violent. We've heard some pretty extreme stories. There was a story recently in the news of a child who, he was 14, and I believe it was Iowa. His parents took his cell phone away, and he ran away, and they found him frozen to death. And you're like, how could it be that drastic? But that is their lifeline. They are addicted to their phones. We have adults addicted to our phones. And it's hitting the brain in the same way that drugs do. And we are going back to it over and over again to try and duplicate that. On this particular slide, the top brain is a healthy brain. The bottom one, heavy screen use and drug use look the same when we scan our brains, is what we're beginning to find out.
So this is what we grew up on, old school Sesame Street, if you remember. So but we entertained ourselves when growing up. And this is Fortnite. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. Many of you probably have it in your home. What our kids do for hours and hours. Kids as young as 5 are getting addicted to Fortnite. So I don't know about you, but that gets my heart rate up a little bit. And these kids that don't have fully developed brains are spending hours upon hours playing this, not only is it violent, it is dumping heavy amounts of dopamine onto their brains in the exact same way that cocaine does. And so then we take the video games away, and they're violent, they're angry, and we wonder why. This is why.
Just to go back to that very quickly, a presentation we were giving in the Valley, we had a couple of kindergarten teachers say that the little 5-year-olds would say, "How long till school's over?" And they thought, "Oh, you miss your mommy." And they're like, "No, how long till we can go home and play Fortnite?" So they're really seeing a lot of issues with it at school. They're counting the hours until they can go home and get back on their games because of that dopamine that they're seeking. We use this slide for a couple of reasons. First of all, the first indication that we were going to be having problems with video games actually came out of the military. Quite a lot of studies came out early on, and they called it the smelly soldier syndrome. And they were finding that, they had set up video games for the soldiers for their downtime, and that they wouldn't get off of them. They wouldn't get off and shower. They would just go to the bathroom in jars next to their controls. And that was our very early studies that something was going on here. We use this also for the fire that's in the background. Burn centers, when they are having trouble controlling patients' pain levels with morphine and other medications, if their hands are not burned, they put them on video games, and it numbs their pain. It helps their pain. So we do know that we are using devices to numb, and that's kind of nice when you come home at the end of the day and you're tired and overwhelmed. They say we can start numbing within about 30 seconds as we get on our devices. But for our children who need to be learning to handle their emotions, work through issues, to let them constantly go to devices, they are not learning those skills, and they're numbing.
Right, yeah.
Okay, they say the average child will have 2,000 pictures taken of themselves before the age of 2. Studies are saying that on college campuses, narcissistic traits are up significantly, like 80%. Empathy is going down. We also, it's lowering our inhibitions to where we're very comfortable being photographed. We have I don't know what word to use, it's an epidemic of kids taking nude photos and sending them to each other. I actually taught a teen substance abuse group yesterday, and I asked them about it, like, do you know anybody doing that, sending nude photos? And they laughed and said, everybody. And they really thought it was no big deal. It's what kids do. What's the big deal? That was their attitude.
Yeah, they're seeing that is a problem in as young as the 6th grade is when it's starting.
The other thing that we're seeing is with our constant photo taking, we are not ever in the moment. Our children don't know how to be. I share the story that my husband and I were in. Sorry, I've got allergies. We were in California last year in April, and there was a prom going on right on the beach. There was this big paved area with shops all around, and behind was the ocean. The sun was setting, and so I told my husband, let's sit down and watch prom. This is going to be really fantastic. The whole night, all they did was they grouped together, take pictures, then they all had to come and see it. I don't like how I look. They would restage it, take it again, and then they all had to send it. That was their prom. We didn't see dancing going on or anyone enjoying themselves. There was that need to make this look good for social media, recreate it, send it immediately, and it was hard to watch. So our children are not learning to be in the moment. And we will see even little children, I have to say, I've done it too. Little children will say, let me see. And they're posing, they're playing out their life for pictures.
We've become a society that we feel like we have to document every moment of our life instead of just being in the moment. Also, if you go to a park and you sit back and you watch the moms not interacting anymore with their children. They have their phones out and they're taking 75 videos of them going down the slide and then they're posting it. It's becoming a huge problem.
So we all seek freedom, safety, and connection. There's lots of issues with all three and our devices. Our children are high achieving. We know that. This generation is smart. My little 2-year-old grandson is smarter than me with devices. They come wired for it. It's interesting. We have a lot. We're very blessed in this country, but we don't know how to be. We don't know how to be ourselves. Our teenagers are jockeying for social status in the halls of their school and online. There's 2 social groups that they're trying to maintain in balance, and they say it is literally exhausting to them, and they don't know who to be. We're going to talk about secondhand screen time. We were so interested to find out about this, and we had thought about some of these problems, but in the same way that we did not know about secondhand smoke for a long time. Think of the cars that used to roll down the highway with all the windows up and everyone smoking and all the children in there, and we all just thought that was normal until we started to see studies of the damage that secondhand smoke was doing. We now know that there is damage being done to our children through our use of screens and not paying attention and giving them eye-to-eye contact for their brain development. Since we've been trained on this, everywhere I go, I watch, and it's heartbreaking to see children trying to get your attention and you're always on the phone. And I know people say, we've always had distractions, we've had television or whatever, but think that our phones literally go everywhere we go. It is sad to see when you drive a child to school and drop them off, all of the moms talking on the phone. That's such good time to talk to your kids and establish bonds, and we're always on our phones. So what they say is that we have continuous partial attention, and this is changing the way our little children's brains develop. That pleasure circuit that allows them to feel joy and happiness in the normal, natural things of the world, that is developed through our nurturing, our attention to them. And when we are not giving it, or we're only partially all the time, where you don't look at them, yeah, have the Fruit Loops, whatever, that is not allowing that pleasure circuit to develop properly. One of the side effects that we believe is coming from that is attention deficit disorder. And our teachers are saying, we cannot get these kids to settle down. At churches, they're telling us, what happened to our children? They can't settle down. And so they say on average, I'm not real attached to my phone, but they say on average we touch, swipe, pick up, look at our phones an average of 2,000 times a day. So I don't know, it seems high, but anyway, so our poor children, we're giving them devices because they want to be on it. It's fun. They're getting all that dopamine. Real life is boring. And then we are also interrupting that through not giving our attention, our eye-to-eye contact, our full attention to our children. So it's a real problem. All right, don't do the dance. I feel bad. I've taught parenting at Change Point for several years. I'm not doing it presently. And in the past, I would say, use that cell phone because that's what they love. So if you don't like their behavior, you take that phone away. And I found out now that it's not good advice. We're finding that that is not the appropriate thing to do. So we tell a child, I trust you, here's a phone, and 3,000 strangers you've never met, you'll be fine. Then they didn't do their chores, I take the phone. Then after work, I'm exhausted. Please, can I watch something? Okay, so I give it back, and this becomes a dance. We're finding that is interrupting the relationship. that's their lifeline. And so they will not come to us with very important things because they don't want that phone to go anywhere. So they hide things that they're seeing on the phones, maybe a friend that's in distress. They don't want us to be paying any kind of attention to anything with that phone because they don't want it to go anywhere. There are definitely things that you will take that phone from them over, and we'll show you a contract that we encourage everyone to have. If they're sexting, if they're on unsafe sites, if they're giving personal information, different things that you're going to agree to ahead of time, that phone will be taken. But to use it to get good grades or behaviors, unless you have already contracted with them on that, we're finding that is not opening the lines of communication with our teenagers.
It's hurting our trust. Well, and it's exhausting if you're constantly, here's your phone, you did really good, your room's dirty, give me your phone. The back and forth, back and forth. And so we're not saying give them their phone and never take it away again. That's, like she said, that's not what we're saying. So we're going to show you, you're going to make a contract. There's going to be big things that the phone will be taken away for, but just the everyday life, we are trying to get away from using the phone as the way that we are parenting, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And we are all pioneers at digital parenting. This is a large experiment we're all part of. And we're just now learning what possibly we need to be doing. So for a child to develop in a healthy way, they need nature, movement, physical touch, and connection. And our phones interrupt and do not promote any of those 4 areas. So we're going to be talking tonight about some things we can do to beef that up. We are not advocating you just rip phones from kids. Technology is here to stay. There is lots of positive things about it. But we need to be paying attention to these 4 things and upping those 4 things as we go ahead and deal with our technology that's going to be part of our lives from here on.
Right.
Okay, April has a couple of slides in a minute, but pornography is laced all through our different sites that the kids are on. As we said, when people say, when should we give a child a smartphone, we really would like to say never, but that's probably not going to happen.
We say delay as long as possible.
Yes. And, some interesting stories. I have a good friend who they had decided they were not giving their daughter a smartphone, and they moved to Texas. She's 14, she's a freshman, and you are required to have Instagram. That's how teachers give assignments, grade, and interact with parents.
Made our brains explode. We would like to take a field trip to Texas.
Because pornography is all through Instagram, easily available. There's different, well, you're going to talk about that. I'm stealing her thing.
Quite all right.
So yeah, of course, porn affects kids, all of us, in these 4 ways. In our relations, it teaches us to view others as objects rather than people emotionally. When children, they say that this is now the first introduction to sex for kids is through pornography. The age is lowering all the time. I think it's down to 9 or 8 now.
We've heard as young as 7.
Mm-hmm. When they see that, there'll be 2 things that happen. They'll have guilt, which is a good thing. Some of those children will internalize that and have some issues from that. Some of them continue to go back until they are immune to it and become addicted to it. We are very much wanting to try and catch kids when they're young so that they don't have this battle. It is heartbreaking, the struggle that people have with addiction to pornography, drugs, and alcohol. All of those addictions are, they're tough. They're tough. It's doable, but let's catch it early so that they don't have to try and climb out of that. Intellectually, it shapes how kids view relationships and sex. And neurologically, it wires our brains to respond to images and not people. And we very much are seeing that yeah, it's a tall order that we're trying to get ahead of it. Once again, if you talk to the kids, because they're so used to sending nude photos and whatever, they're like, it is no big deal. It's everywhere. It's no big deal, and it is a big deal. I was very encouraged. Our churches have been ringing the alarm bell for quite a while on pornography, and at Change Point we had a training on shame a couple of weeks ago where she addressed pornography problems are exploding, and she had no religious affiliation, and it's long in coming, and I'm excited that it's becoming on our radar more and more so that we can help these children avoid pornography addiction.
Yeah. So this generation that we are raising, we refer to them as the iGen, the I generation. They do not remember a time without the internet, which to us is crazy. And when we talk to our kids about it, I don't know about you guys, but it blows their minds like, well, what did you do when you were at school and you needed something? Well, you had to figure it out yourself. So it's so different than it was when we were all growing up. So, and they are 1 in 4 Americans are the iGen, and we hit on this a little bit before, but because of the heavy screen use and gaming, our children's attention span is down to 12 seconds. They're spending hours and hours a day on screens. Screens are coming heavy into schools as well. And so they're on screens at school, and then they come home and they're on screens, and it's causing ADHD. 1 out of 3 boys are currently being treated for ADD and ADHD, and I've gone into several schools and trained teachers, and they talk about how different it is in the last 5 years even from what it used to be. They're having such a hard time controlling their classrooms and their kids because they come to school and they're so wound and they can't sit still and they're wanting to go home and play on their games. And they said that every year they keep saying it just can't get any worse, and then the next year it does.
I just have to hop in real quick. One big thing we're seeing is lack of sleep, and hopefully we have someone that's going to answer some of our questions from Change Point. Lack of sleep is causing all kinds of trouble for our kids. They're staying up all night on their games or social media, and that's another reason we're having so many issues at schools and everywhere.
Absolutely. So Instagram, there's a lot of parents that believe, and we haven't known, so it's okay, but parents think that Instagram is like, if I'm going to let my kid on an app, it's going to be Instagram because I can make sure that they don't befriend anybody that they shouldn't, and I keep an eye on it. Well, Instagram is so dangerous for our children, and there's so many reasons why. You can't filter what they see if they go to the search button, and you can't take away the search button. It's full of porn. It's 95% of older teens have you guys heard of Finstas? Has anybody here heard of Finstas? Yeah, so that's fake Instagram accounts. So 95% of our teens have their regular Instagram account that mom and dad look at, where they're always doing what they should, they're everywhere that they said they should be, and then they have fake Instagram accounts. And those are where they have a smaller group of friends. And that's where they're doing dangerous things. They're posting inappropriate photos. They're posting things like drug use and all kinds of things. I should have made a slide of how to find fake Instagram accounts. But if you go into your child's primary Instagram account, you need to have their username and password, which I recommend if your child lives with you, you should have all usernames and passwords. You just should. And so if you click on their name, there's an arrow that comes down. And if they have a fake Instagram account, those will be there. So another problem with Instagram is kids are searching and learning how to self-harm. That's huge on Instagram right now. They're learning how to cut, to be cutters, to deal with their pain. And that's a big one on Instagram right now. Sadly, something that we've seen kids search is how to tie a noose. We had a sweet 17-year-old boy in Mesa that took his own life, and yeah, that's what he searched on Instagram. It's hard to talk about, but this is what's happening. Instagram, they did a study, and out of all of the social media apps, Instagram was number one for causing anxiety, depression, bullying, feelings of loneliness, and comparison. It is the most detrimental app to our mental health, and especially to our children's mental health. It's very visual. There's not a lot of interaction, and there's a lot of comparison, and so it's really dangerous. I hate to see especially young girls on Instagram. I highly believe the longer you can delay that, the better. I don't personally think anybody under the age of 14 belongs on Instagram. Snapchat, good old Snapchat. Whenever I go into schools and talk to kids, this is when they decide they don't like me, is when I talk about Snapchat. Because if I could choose one app that I hate the absolute most, it would be Snapchat. Snapchat is super dangerous. So I was learning about Snapchat, and I was talking about Snapchat, and I decided I'd never actually been on Snapchat. I had just been trained about it. So I decided to make a Snapchat account, and so I did, and within the first 10 minutes, so I put that I was a 35-year-old adult, and within the first 10 minutes, porn was popping up everywhere. I wasn't searching for it. It was just becoming available to me. Within the first 10 minutes of ever getting on Snapchat, I had 17 friend requests from unknown people, but surprisingly, they were all my age and had the same interests. And I've had one of my trainers do the same thing, and he is a grown man, but he put that he was like a 12-year-old girl, and suddenly all these friend requests come in from 12-year-old girls when really they're child predators. Sergeant Hart will talk more about this later, but it's such a dangerous place for our kids to be. They're sending pictures back and forth, and these pictures disappear within seconds, and the messages as well. And so they're braver on Snapchat than anywhere else because they can send a nude photo, which a lot of kids are doing, and it disappears. So if your parent takes your phone to see what's happening, they won't see that because it disappears. What they don't think about is the person that they're sending that nude photo to is screenshotting that picture. So there's no way for parents to monitor Snapchat correctly. The kids can find their way around it. Something really scary about Snapchat is there's something called Snap Map that you have to go in and disable. If it's not disabled, anyone can find your location within 20 feet, which is frightening. So if your child's on Snapchat and they meet somebody who's saying all the right things and they're giving out information, and if they have that turned on, someone can find them pretty easily. Something to tie in with that, when you buy an iPhone or smartphone, it comes set to explicit, every single phone. So if you do buy your child a phone, you have to go into settings and change the settings to not be explicit. So these are our goals. Digital wellness. We want to teach you to lead tech in your homes and not let tech lead you. You're in control. Technology is not in control. So this picture's kind of old, but these are my boys. And this is one of the reasons I do what I do. But I talk about the rule of 5. 5 years before your children are going to be introduced to things like drugs, alcohol, sexting, sexual intimacy, vaping. It's huge in the schools right now. Such a huge problem. Trafficking, which we're going to learn more about. So all these things, we need to start having these really hard conversations 5 years before our children are going to see them. So if you think about sexting, we're seeing that problem starting in 5th grade. So we need to have conversations with our kids at really early ages, age appropriate, of course, but they're hard conversations. And there's a lot of parents that are scared to have these conversations with their kids, but it's better to come from you than where else they can learn it. I always get asked about the last one, the party exit, which I think is important for parents to have a code with their kids if they find themselves in a scary situation. They went to a party and they didn't know that the parents weren't going to be home, and there's drinking and drugs going on, and they can text the letter X to you and know that you will come pick them up and get them home safely, no questions asked. That's hard for parents to agree to, but think about if your teenager goes to a party and gets in over their head and they're drinking or whatever they're doing. Let's say that they're drunk and they drove, but they don't know what to do now. Would you rather have that party exit available to them, or would you rather they get behind a wheel drunk and try to drive themselves home or to a friend's house? It's just something to think about. So digitally healthy families, they stay in the know, they talk to their children about technology and media literacy, and it's not a one and done conversation. This is a conversation that we should be having monthly with our children, and things change so often. It's impossible for me to stay up on the data coming in because there's so much constantly. Have a family data plan. We hit on that when we were talking about don't do the dance. I'll show you in a minute, but you can Google family data plans, and you can make it look like whatever you want it to look like. You can decide it with your children. Number 3, central charging station. If I had to choose one thing that you go home tonight and you do starting tonight, it's a central charging station. We need to take our children's devices out of their bedrooms. Our children aren't sleeping. That's when they are making bad choices late at night because they have their phone in their room with them. The bullies are following them into their bedrooms at night because they have their technology with them. So have a central charging station in your bedroom so they have to walk past you to get to it, not in the kitchen. That's not going to work. So you put everything on a central charging station. You choose what time, let's say 9 p.m. Everything's turned in, everything goes on the central charging station. Everybody goes to bed. That's when you're doing your safety checks. So you should have all of your children's usernames and passwords. You just should. If they're living under your roof, you should have all usernames and passwords. Sometimes parents say, well, I trust my kid and I don't want them to feel like I don't trust them. That's great, but do you trust the other millions of people that have access to them? It's the same as you lock your doors at night because you don't trust the outside world. So we will give you some monitoring apps and filters in a little bit. Virtual lockers for the future. College applications, the first thing they're doing now when they get the application is they are looking up your name on social media to see who you really are. So we need to teach our kids to use social media for good. It's not going anywhere. I can't just tell you to just keep your kids off social media and never let them on. It's not realistic. So, and have a balanced tech diet. We need to be teaching our kids ways that they can self-govern themselves. This is a family screen time contract. So you're going to make a contract of rules that you're going to go by in your home, and also have your kids be involved in this. Like, so what do you think? Why would I take your phone away? Let's say I catch you giving our address out to a stranger. Do you think that I should take away your phone for that? Have this conversation with your kids. Let them be involved in it. But also don't do the dance that I trust you, I don't trust you, I trust you. Because then you are harming your relationship with your child. So dignity versus respect. Our children are looking for respect online. That's what they want. They want everyone to think that they're cool, that they're doing the cool thing, that people admire them. And we need to be teaching our children about dignity and their inherent worth. And so we have, let me make it work, a video about this.
Don't walk through the world looking for evidence that you don't belong, because you will always find it.
Yes.
Don't walk through the world looking for evidence that you're not enough, because you'll always find it. Our worth and our belonging are not negotiated with other people. We carry those inside of our hearts. And so for me, I know who I am. I'm clear about that. And I'm not going to negotiate that with you. I will negotiate a contract with you. I will negotiate maybe even a topic with you, but I'm not going to negotiate who I am with you. Because then, and this is, I think, the heart of the book, then I may fit in for you, but I no longer belong to myself.
So that's what we need to be teaching our kids. I think we need to be reminding ourselves of that as well. So it takes a village to be a good villager. There's two meanings to this. So it takes a village to raise a child. We all know that. So we as parents need to be willing to, if we see something on social media that's alarming of someone else's child, we need to be able to call that parent and say, hey, I saw this on Instagram. I don't know what it means, but I thought I'd give you a heads up because I would want to know if it was my child. And then on the other side of that phone call or whatever, the other parent needs to be okay with that. And instead of the not my kid, thank you, I appreciate that, I will look into it. So I think men are better at that than women. Women tend to be like, well, what are you saying? I'm not a good mom. But it happens.
We're edgy.
We're a little bit touchy sometimes. So, and then we also need to be teaching our children, if they see something that is concerning on social media about their friend, we need to tell them that they need to take that to an adult, to care more about the friend than the friendship. And it'll be okay because you're being a good friend. You're being a good villager. We are just handing these devices over to our children with no training. And it's like giving them the keys to a sports car and saying good luck, and then they crash the sports car and we're shocked and we don't know what happened and we're mad. And we're doing the same thing with phones. So just to put a few faces to these statistics, this happened in Glendale. These girls they went to Glendale High, they were dating. The girl with the glasses broke up with the other girl, Dorothy. And Dorothy started transmitting her pain online. So she started tweeting out reasons I'll die tomorrow. There's a lot more other things on there. I'm blind. But I believe her last tweet was goodbye. And that morning she went to Glendale High. The cafeteria had almost 1,000 students in it, and she shot her girlfriend and then shot herself. And so these kids saw that tweet. They saw all these tweets happening, reasons I'll die tomorrow, my life sucks, or whatever it is, and then goodbye. It was retweeted a lot, and no one took that to an adult because we're not telling our kids that that's what you do when you see it. This is Marcus. He was the number 2 runner in the state of Arizona in 2015. That picture of him dressed up is him on prom night. He showed up to the dance intoxicated with 15 other classmates. They were all expelled. Marcus lost his full ride scholarship to a big university. He lost what he felt like was his identity. And so then Marcus started transmitting his pain on social media. That's what our kids do, is they take their pain to social media. And so he starts tweeting out things that are a little bit concerning. Life has fallen apart in front of my own eyes. So he was in a crisis, and his last tweet was help. And then Marcus drove to school, and right after the bell rang in front of the school, shot and killed himself. And that tweet was retweeted, is it over 300 times? It's hundreds and hundreds of times that these kids, so it was liked over 600 times, I believe. And yeah, it was liked 630 times. 391 students retweeted it, and that is actually rare for a boy to be transmitting his pain so obviously on social media. So we need to be having these conversations with our kids. What do you do when you see this? And then a school and community is more at risk after a suicide has already occurred. And so I talk about our kids transmitting their pain online. That's what they do. They had a bad day at school. They take it to social media. Their mom pisses them off. They take it to social media because they don't have the tools to transform their pain. We as adults, most of the time, have tools and ways that we can transform our pain. We have a bad day. Our boss ticks us off. We can work through those emotions. Sometimes, as adults, we do take that to social media as well, but not as much as our kids do. They are taking all their pain to social media. And these are also some things that our kids are posting online. Super explicit, sexually explicit photos, drug use, underage drinking, and these are all things that are never going away. And our kids are losing college scholarships, jobs. It's affecting their whole lives because we're handing over the World Wide Web with no training. We're just handing it over. Good luck. Hope everything works out okay for you. But what our children are doing is they are petitioning online to be seen, heard, and loved. That's what they want. They just want to be seen, heard, and loved. And if they're not getting it from you, they're taking it to social media, and then they're trying to do it in inappropriate ways. And so this isn't just about your kids tonight. This is also about you, about your connection. Going back to one of the first slides I showed about the 85% rise in teen suicide. We are working upstream so we don't get to that. So remember that your kids need to be seen, heard, and loved. Put down your own phones. When they're in pain, sit in the ditch with them. That's what they want. That's what they need. Don't fix it. Words don't usually fix pain. Connection fixes pain. How much time do I have left? I'm getting slow. Digital
It's 8.
detox. My children were pretty heavily addicted to technology. We went through a digital detox, 2 months of no technology. It sounds really hard. It's totally doable. If you have questions afterwards, come talk to me. I think I'm going to skip over this.
Yeah, for time-wise.
And possibly the next one too. Our boys, I will just tell you that our boys are struggling. We are losing our boys 4-1. Over girls, the East Valley is in crisis. They are having an epidemic. In the last year and a half, they have now lost 39 teens to suicide. That I have to keep changing that number. 39 kids in the last year and a half. And so we've got to get ahead of this. Sorry, it's taking me forever to click through this. Okay, so strategies, things that we can be doing as parents. Time in instead of time out. Car rides with our kids. Shoulder-to-shoulder walks. So I learned in my training that I was totally doing everything wrong. When I was having a hard conversation with one of my boys, I have all boys, I'd be like, look at me. Look me in the eyes while I'm talking to you. And I found out through my training that boys, and probably men too, hate eye contact when they are, well, if they're in trouble, or I see men nodding their heads. They hate eye contact. And so if you want to get your child talking, go on a walk, shoulder to shoulder. Car rides are excellent for if you need to get something out of your kid, put them in a car and just listen. Just start listening, less talking, more listening. Stop interviewing for pain when your child gets in the car after a long day at school and we just start interviewing them for pain. How's your day? Was your teacher mean? Did you have that mean sub again today? Let them get in the car and let them start talking. They need water. That's always good if they're anxious or they're upset. Water, I forget the name of the part of the brain that calms, but it does. This cut off my favorite slide, but what it said was, you are your child's best app. So there's really good apps and filters available to us, and we'll go over those in a little bit. But most filters and apps, your child can find their way around. Our children are brilliant. And so those are really great things, and they're needed, but more than anything, they need you. You are your child's best app. So have open communication. Make these hard conversations not so hard. Educate yourself. That's what you guys are doing. That's what you guys are doing tonight, and good for you. When we know better, we do better. And so now we can go do better. Lead by example. So now we're going to talk about what other dangers are out there. I'm going to bring up Sergeant Hart. He's very knowledgeable in this.
Okay, so like Commander McNeil introduced me earlier, just to give a little bit about me, I've been with Shoal PD now 18 years. Started on the patrol, worked 10 years on patrol, was a supervisor. Then I went to criminal investigations where I worked 5 years as a detective, handling a multitude of cases all over the state of Arizona, really. We traveled all over doing lots of things. And then went to the drug task force, worked the drug task force for 2 years for Navajo County in the south half. And now I'm currently in charge of the dispatch center. So I've had a lot of experience working with a lot of people. I've done a lot of investigations. As a supervisor over the unit, I had some great detectives that I worked with, both in Shoal PD, Navajo County Sheriff's Office, Navajo County Attorney's Office. So we've done a lot of really neat cases, and we've done a lot of really neat things. One of the first things I learned when I got into criminal investigations is I had to learn social media. I was not familiar with social media. I didn't have a Facebook account. Sorry, I always refer to it as face page, but I didn't have a Facebook account. I had to create one because I had to learn how these people were connecting and communicating with each other all the time. That's how we were tracking bad people, is because they were sharing so much stuff on social media. So we had to learn. And as I learned about that, we started learning about the kind of things that were going on. And I have seen nothing but an increase more and more and more and more and more. When I went into the drug task force for 2 years, that's how we talked to all our bad guys. We watch people sell all their drugs across social media. There's so many people who don't have minutes on their phone. So I experienced this myself. Just a couple weeks ago, my phone broke, didn't have a phone, and as law enforcement, I need a phone. I'm always on call, somebody's always trying to get a hold of me. Well, my phone was broke. So I had to get a phone from one of my kids that got a different phone. So I got a phone, didn't have any minutes on it, so the only way I could communicate was through social media. As long as I had a Wi-Fi connection, I can communicate through social media apps like your Facebook Messenger, or Snapchat, or Instagram. I could communicate with people still. And I didn't have to have minutes on the phone. It's a blank phone, nothing on it but the apps. And as long as I had a Wi-Fi connection, I could make communications with people. And so I stayed connected for a whole week with people with no minutes on a phone. And then I got a new phone, and now I can finally talk to people again. But what we were learning is that's how things were transcending across all these social media apps. That's how we were learning how dope was being sold. That's how we were learning who was selling dope, who was friends with who, because everybody friends each other. And now I know that Tom, that I hear is selling dope, is Thomas, and Thomas is friends with these people, and we can start making those connections. And the kids out there are doing the exact same thing. We were tracking kids on social media at school to see who was selling dope at school, what was going on at school, and we're starting to see that trickle all the way down to the age of like 6th grade, where we were seeing sexting going on. We were seeing things like that all the way down to that level. So it was a real eye-opening experience for me. And as we started getting into that, we started thinking, we had a chief come in, Chief Shelley came in and started talking about sex trafficking and human trafficking. And again, it was one of those things where I thought, that's not really happening in our community. We're dealing dope and we have things like that are going on here, but we're not seeing sex trafficking and those kinds of things. Chief Shelley was very big on that, and he actually sent me and one of my detectives at the time to Washington, D.C. to the HOPE conference, which is all about sex trafficking. And I was sitting at a table in Washington, D.C. with hundreds of people in this big conference room, and we're getting ready to have lunch, and some girl walks up and sits down with us, and we're just talking. There's probably 15 people sitting at this table, and as we're talking, she mentions to us, "Where are you guys from?" And I said, "Oh, we're from a little place in Arizona, a little tiny town called Sholo." And she goes, "Oh, I know Sholo." And I said, "You do?" And she goes, "Yeah, I was trafficked in Snowflake." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Yeah, I was picked up in Phoenix as a runaway juvenile, and I was taken to Snowflake, where I was held in a shed for 4 days, and I was being sex trafficked while I was in Snowflake." And I was like, "Holy cow, that happens in our area?" And she's like, "Absolutely, happens everywhere." So at that point, I decided we need to start taking note of what's going on in our community. So my detective, Toby Gilmore, and I, for those of you guys who know Toby, he's a fantastic detective, great cop. He was one of my detectives at the time, and so we came back from that conference and we started looking at this, trying to figure out what can we do to be better monitors of our community and our kids out there. And then one day we were at work and we get a report of a missing 18-year-old girl. And the circumstances were a little weird. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of back up a little bit, and just so that you guys understand, I'm going to share a case study on this case that we worked in our community and how it affected not only me personally, probably the best case I've ever worked as far as satisfaction and hard work and seeing people come together and really feeling like we accomplished something. I to this day am a firm believer we saved somebody that day, and it's not for lack of good parenting, wasn't for lack of anything, it was all a lack of knowledge of what's going on social media. The parents were fantastic to work with. Everybody did their part to help us do what we needed to do to try and bring this girl back home, and it was all social media related. So what's going on out there? Again, sex trafficking, drugs, all that kind of stuff. Oops, look at that, I can do that. They're sharing parties and what's going on out there. So the writing is really super small, but sex trafficking, what is sex trafficking? It's a commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, or coercion when a person induced to perform the act is under the age of 18 years old. This is ARS, Arizona Revised Statutes. This is what the law says is sex trafficking. A commercial sex act means an item or value traded for sexual services. It's prostitution, pornography, sexual performance. Domestic minor sex trafficking is the commercial sexual exploitation of American children within U.S. borders for monetary or other compensation. That's your ARS 1307A. You want to look it up, you can read all those statutes. This is going on in our community. This is going on all over the place. It's not a big city problem. It's happening right here in Sholo, and I'm going to show you a case where we talked about it. Some shocking facts. This is, again, some of the things in Arizona. The average teen enters the sex trade in Arizona at 14 years of age. So when a child is being trafficked for sexual services in Arizona, the average age is 14. And why would that be about the average age, do you guys think? Anybody?
Social media, when they get access to social media?
They start having access to social media, but that's about that age when kids are starting to kind of get out on their own, right? They're teenagers now, and mom and dad don't understand me, and I need to be out on my own, and I can take care of myself, right? Anybody have any teenagers? That's about that age when they start doing that. So at that age, that's when we're starting to see kids run away from home. They're mad, they're frustrated, and they run away from home, 13, 14, 15 years old. And when they run away from home, they're picked up by somebody who cares about them, right? These are the people who are going to take them in. I will take care of you. I'm going to do things for you. I'm going to buy you things. I'm going to do everything I can to protect you. And before they know it, they're caught up in this world and this lifestyle, and they're being trafficked. And now they're being sold on the street, or they're having sex with people 15, 20, 25, 30 times a day. It's happening in our state. So 1 out of every 3 teens living on the street will be lured to prostitution and engagement within 48 hours. When the kid runs away from home, within 48 hours, somebody is making contact with them. And somebody is trying to catch them up and bring them into this world, because there are a lot of bad people out there. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I'm trying to make sure everybody understands that this is a reality within even our community. It's happening, and we're seeing it happen. So the FBI stats states that once a child is involved in prostitution, their average life expectancy is only 7 years after that. They're dying within 7 years of being trafficked because of heavy drug use. They're being fed drugs, and now once they're being fed drugs, they're addicted to drugs, and then they're being sold. They're being murdered on the streets. It's happening in the valley. It's happening all over the place. We haven't had something to that extreme happen in our area yet, but I do say it with the word yet, because what happens there happens here. It just happens a little bit slower and a little bit less frequent. So we're seeing those kinds of things happen. 70 to 90% of children victims were sexually abused prior to being trafficked. So kids that are subject to some kind of sexual abuse or being exposed to some of the pornography, those kinds of things start to numb their senses to what is acceptable behavior. And so when their senses are getting numbed, now again, texting nudie pictures and stuff like that is happening all the time, as young as 6th grade. And now they're starting to become more desensitized to the things that are happening out there. And so then when they're watching porn and they start getting sexually active, it's not as unusual to them now. They've been watching it for months. They've been seeing it for years. They've been sending their own nude pictures. And so now it's not a culture shock to them to be sexually active at a young age. And so we're starting to see those kinds of things happen. And when I talk about a pimp, if you will, trafficking a child, there is so much money to be made in that those pimps are very, very, very protective of their bottoms, they call them. These kids that are involved in this, they're very protective of them, because that is their cash cow. That's how they're making their money. They're making a living off of these girls. One girl can make a sex trafficker $175,000 a year, because they sell them not just once a day. They're selling them 15, 20, 30 times a day. And each one makes that guy money. And that guy, now the girl, she's not making any money on it. But you know what she is getting? She's getting dope, because now he's got her addicted. And when she's addicted, she can't live without it. It's an addiction that she has to have. So he feeds her the dope, sells her body, and then he gets the proceeds. And he'll do that with not just one girl, he'll do that with girl after girl after girl after girl. And it's happening more and more and more. Fortunately, we've made some major progress with the elimination of Backpage. That was one of the biggest sex trafficking websites imaginable for children. And years that battle went on with parents fighting Backpages, trying to get that taken down, because that's all that they were selling so much sex on Backpage, it was ridiculous. We finally won some battles, and Backpage has taken their sex part down, but that's not stopping it, because what else is out there? Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, all these other websites. They're just moving their operation. These guys are moving their operations to some other website. So that's why this social media is so important for the parents to be involved and know what's going on with their children. And I'm going to get into the case study. So, well, let's just stop here. One of the things that's happening with our kids that we're identifying is some of these kids that are getting sold and falling into this lifestyle are what we call throwaway kids, runaways or throwaways. So abused and hurt kids with low self-esteem, they're looking for that attention. What was April's quote on the one of your last ones? They want to be seen, loved, and heard, right? And if they're not getting it home, they're getting it on social media, because they post a selfie. They post their selfie, and then who's the first person that's going to contact them? Some dude, and say, wow, you're really pretty. And what's that do? It raises her self-esteem, makes her feel really good. And, wow, this guy really cares about me. I really enjoy this. I enjoy the attention. And then it's another one and another one and another one. And so they continue to get this build of self-esteem because their self-esteem was low. And their self-esteem was low because they went to school and somebody got mad at them and posted something bad about them on social media. And then they came home and then everybody was posting something bad about them on social media. And then some guy comes along and posts something good about them on social media. And so they're playing this battle all day long of what's going on out there. So those kind of children are very susceptible to somebody picking them up and starting to try to recruit them. Immature, diminished cognitive abilities. Our kids are they're not as mature as I feel we were when we were growing up. They're not getting those tools to learn how to deal with their problems. They're not maturing like we used to. They're constantly just immersing in this and the games and the video and all these things, and they're not learning how to deal with problems anymore. They're not learning how to figure things out. When something bad happens, they turn everything off and play a video game. When something bad happens, they go on social media. They don't figure out how to solve problems anymore. They're not figuring it out on their own and how to deal with this. So, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not just girls. There are plenty of boys being trafficked. Plenty of boys being trafficked out there on the streets. There's a high demand for boys just the same. And these are the apps they're using. Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn even. LinkedIn is more seen as a business type of a situation, but they're using that. They're using any way, in any shape and form they can make contact with a child or young adults. Anything they can use. Tinder, dating sites. This particular case I'm gonna talk about started with just an instant dating site. Just people wanting to get to know each other. And then it started more with something else like a Snapchat type of an app. And then it turned into, well, hey, let's get on this. And then they just started sharing information. And before we know it, we're going to end up where we were. So computers and the internet give rural areas, little tiny towns like Show Low, give the ability for these people to make contacts all over the world. It's not the big city anymore. We can get a girl or a child in Show Low can get just as much attention here in Show Low as they can in Phoenix because of social media. It's so huge. It's everywhere. It's bringing things from the city, just like we're seeing here. The risky behavior, all these weird pictures, and the parties, and they're hooking up, and they can do things now that we couldn't do. When we were in high school, if you wanted to go to a party, you had to go to the Circle K, wait for people to show up, figure out who was going to be where, and where's the party tonight, and you had to share information. Now, it's a quick Snapchat, and 100 people show up because everybody knows where it's at, and the snap goes away. Now nobody's tracking it. Everybody saw it, it's all gone, and that's gone in a couple of minutes, and so they're sharing this information like that. Use of smartphones, again, we're talking about this kind of stuff with the smartphones. That's how pimps are getting these people. They're finding them on those websites, they're finding them on these apps, and they're making first contacts. Just like April said, created a profile, and within 10 minutes she had 17 people friending her, saying, oh, hey, cool, how are you, what's up? These kinds of things, and that's what they're using. So, people think it doesn't happen here. Absolutely, 100% that's a myth. It's happening here. October 2014, that's the case we're going to talk about. It was a 2014 case, not a yesterday case. This happened 4 years ago. This is when we started realizing what was going on in our community. November 2014, the Hope Conference, that's when I was at the Hope Conference, and I had this girl walk up and say I was trafficked in Snowflake. So I was, again, an eye-opener for me. History between Snowflake and Mesa. There was 2 girls out of Snowflake several years ago, ran away, went to Mesa, and this is a Chief Shelley story that he can share and speak very intelligently on. And within 3 days, they were already picked up and being fed dope and being trafficked within 3 days. 2 young teenagers right out of Snowflake. Yes, they were trafficked in Phoenix, but they ran away from Snowflake to go see what was going on, and they want to experience. My parents are mad. I'm mad at my parents, and I need to be out on my own. I can take care of myself. Well, they can't. So in August 2017, we had a Navajo County Sergeant up in Heber make a traffic stop, and the car's full of people, and he's trying to identify what these guys are up to, and there's a couple of young girls in the car. Doesn't even realize what he's got. Finds out he's got 2 runaway girls in the car. Great. As a cop, that's really easy. I can arrest these 2 girls on runaway status, and we take them down to the station. These 2 guys they're with, I didn't know they were only 16. Cut them loose, and we call mom and dad to come get these girls. Well, come to find out, after these dudes are cut loose and mom and dad are on their way, they're doing interviews, and they realize these girls have been being trafficked for the last 3 weeks. They had no idea. it was something so new to law enforcement, we thought a runaway juvenile was a runaway juvenile. We didn't realize that a runaway juvenile was being brought in and being trafficked out on the streets. It was something we were not aware of. And so now we're learning and we were picking up on these things. And so we're getting better. We and law enforcement are getting way better at recognizing the clues and the signs and symptoms now of what this kind of stuff is. So, and then of course, I don't know if you guys have seen, this has been all over the media recently. In October of 2018, the U.S. Marshal's Office in California arrested a person from Apache County who used to work at he was the director of the Haven Health in Apache County, who was into the same kind of stuff. He was out trafficking people. And this was somebody that lived in Apache County, was a director of a health facility for a long time. And then finally, when it started kind of coming out, he fled and they picked him up, marshals picked him up in California and finally arrested him. So it is here, and that's my point. So right here, let's start into this case study and kind of get going. So on October 1st of 2014 at 7 o'clock in the morning, we show up to work, we're detectives, we're in our office, we're punching away on the computers. Patrol gets called to a house locally in town and says, hey, my 18-year-old daughter is missing. And she's 18, right? So she's an adult. So first patrolmen get there and they're like, well, she's 18. If she wants to go missing, she can. And the parents are like, no, you don't understand. She's 18, but she has more of a cognitive ability of a 13, 14-year-old. She's not handicapped or anything. She just has a slower cognitive abilities. So they said she doesn't always know exactly what's going on, but something's not right. And the patrolmen were like, well, we're not really sure. We know she's 18. Should we really be looking into this? Myself and Toby Gilmore got the call, and we looked at it and said, let's go over there and see what's going on. Something doesn't quite add up. So we went there, and we find, again, she's 18. Parents last saw her at 11 o'clock last night. Said she was here. Everything was fine. We all went to bed. 11 o'clock, she was here. And they got up in the morning, and she was gone. So our 18-year-old victim, she's got lower cognitive abilities, but she's very functional. She had graduated high school. She had a job. She was attending NPC. She's very functional, just a little bit slower at recognizing things. So she had a boyfriend on and off again. Our first thought was, when we got there, the screen on her bedroom window was off. No signs of forced entry, but the screen is missing, and it's on the ground. We're looking around. We don't see any obvious, there's nothing like somebody cut the screen. It wasn't that kind of thing. The screen was just removed. We take a quick look around the bedroom. Everything seems to be in order. There's medication that she needs to take is there. Everything is there except what? Cell phone. Cell phone. It's the only thing really that was missing. And the cell phone was turned off. So we couldn't call it and say, hey, where are you? What's going on? Cell phone was turned off. So it went directly to voicemail. So now we don't know why she's gone, where she's gone. We don't know anything about this case. But our gut told us something's not right. She didn't get in a fight with her parents. Everything was going well. She was attending school. She had a job. Everything was going perfect. There was no reason she just got up and left. So that in itself caused us some concern. So again, the only thing missing were her wallet and cell phone. And very important medication she left behind. If she didn't take this medication, it would cause her a great deal of pain with a stomach problem. So she took the medication all the time. And the fact that she didn't take it was very concerning. And made us think maybe she left on her own, but maybe she's not staying gone on her own because she's been gone all night now, as far as we know. So we were a little concerned. So we went and looked. We identified an ex-boyfriend. We went and searched his house. We went to his house and said, is she here? No, she's not here. Can we search? Sure. We searched the whole house. She's not there. No indication that he knew where she was. So all our basic leads, we tried contacting her friends. Nope, we don't know where she's at. They didn't have any idea she was going to leave. Parents had no idea she was going to leave. Nothing, everything was completely unusual. So we looked on her Facebook, we tried to gain access, and there was no immediate information that would tell us that she was friends with somebody that we didn't know. So we didn't really get anywhere there. After a couple hours, we're not getting anywhere. We don't know where she's at. So we called Dad, and we're like, Dad, do you have access to her cell phone account? He said, yes, her phone is on my account. I need you to log in and find out what numbers she's been calling. Who has she been talking to over the last 24 hours? So he goes in there, he pulls up her account, and sure enough, at 11:16, she made a phone call to a number that he did not recognize. And when did he last see her? 11 o'clock. He went to bed at 11, and 11:16 she made a phone call to a number that he did not recognize. He said, I don't know this number. Phone call lasted 6 minutes. But he also identified 104 text messages between his daughter and that phone number within the last 10 days. And he said, I had no idea she was texting somebody that we don't know this number. We don't know who this is. So our job now is identify what? Whose phone number is that? We need to know who that person is. We think that person knows something. So if the victim's phone is turned off, we can't call her. We identify we start looking into that phone number. It's an AT&T track phone. You guys know anything about cell phones? I can't get account information off a track phone, right? I go to Walmart, I can buy one, it gives me a number. I cannot identify a cell phone owner based on the track phone. I can't say, oh, that's Joe Bob's account. It's just a track phone. So I can't track that now. I don't know whose number it even is. So we think she might be in danger. Again, we think she left on her own, but we're worried that she's not staying gone on her own. So we do what we can do in law enforcement. We do what we call an emergency ping. We contacted the cell phone company of AT&T and said, hey, we need to ping this phone number and find out where it is. We don't know who has it, but we think who does have it is with somebody who may be in danger, and we need an identification of where that phone is. And that's not necessarily an easy task, but it can be done. And by this time, there's myself, Toby Gilmore, I have 3 other detectives from Sholo working it. I have 2 Navajo County detectives. Navajo County was fantastic. I made 1 phone call, and they sent detectives to me and said, let's find this girl. Navajo County Attorney's Office sent me an investigator. Let's find this girl. We have about 7 detectives working this thing from about 9 o'clock now, and we're working this case. So we do the emergency ping order. The initial ping on the phone indicates it's somewhere near Snowflake. Now, again, I'm not going to get too much into case status, but the way cell phones work, if you're in the Phoenix area where you got a cell phone tower every 15 feet, you can really ping down a phone to a pretty good location. When you're in the White Mountains where your towers are all spread out all over the place, I can't get one that close. I can say it's somewhere near Snowflake, but I can't say it's at this house like you can down in the Phoenix area. So we know it's in the Snowflake area, the phone, and we're assuming the girl is with the phone, whoever has that phone, and we don't know who that is. So we're still trying to figure all this stuff out. We get all the additional detectives. We got uniform officers sitting at the house in case she comes home. I've got uniform officers going all over the place. I have dispatchers in my dispatch center calling local hotels, trying to see, has she checked in, giving descriptions. We're putting out information as fast and furious as we can because we think we need to find this girl and we need to find her fast. So dispatch calls a local hotel and identifies one of the local hotels that says, yes, we did have a girl that matches that description. Check in here with a much older guy earlier this morning. And so we run to the hotels to try and figure out what's going on. We find that, let's see, local hotel indicates that a person with that description within a few hours, and that they went from one hotel to another hotel within a few hours of each other. And then from that hotel, they said, we're trying to get a bus to Holbrook. And so now we're like, okay, Snowflake, halfway to Holbrook, maybe they're hitching rides. Who is this guy? What the heck are they doing? Where are they going? And so we identify they may be headed to Holbrook. So we're trying to find out if they don't have a car. We can tell they don't have a car because they said we're trying to catch a bus. So now we're trying to identify what's the bus schedule, when's the bus going to show up in Holbrook, because there is a Greyhound out of Holbrook. So we're trying to identify the Greyhound bus. We're still looking at search warrants and preservation orders on phones and phone records and all this stuff, trying to figure out who this person is that she's with. By now it's probably 1 o'clock and we identify the next bus leaving Holbrook is at 3:55. We have almost no time to get to Holbrook and find this girl. We're hoping we get there before the bus gets there. We're hoping we can find her beforehand. So me and Toby jump in the car and we smoke to Holbrook. We're trying to get there and identify where is she, because we're worried about this girl. So we get to Holbrook. I mean, we drove the speed limit, but we got to Holbrook. We were worried because something didn't feel right. Our guts was telling us this was not right. We contact the bus depot, receive information that a man named Kenneth Brown wanted to board a bus with a girl matching that description. And we don't know anything about Kenneth Brown, but now at least we kind of have a name. We're like, okay, who's Kenneth Brown? We're looking on her social media. We're looking on social media. Well, Kenneth is a pretty popular name, and Brown is a pretty popular name. His name might as well have been, Joe Smith or something. It's very common. So that doesn't really help us. Meanwhile, I've got the cell phone company is sending me a ping every like 5 minutes of where this phone is. And now we're identifying, okay, the phone's somewhere in Holbrook. We still don't have any idea where it's at in Holbrook, but we know it's there. The bus depot says somebody did come by matching those descriptions, but we don't know where they went now. So we're still trying to find this person. We contact the victim's family, and they said, we've never heard of Kenneth Brown. We don't know who that is. Nobody knows who Kenneth Brown is. Really weird. So that's when we drive to Holbrook. We get there. We start checking every single hotel, right? We know they were in 2 hotels in Show Low. So Toby and I start driving, Detective Gilmore and I, we start driving to every hotel in Holbrook, knocking and talking to the employees. Do you know these people? Does anybody checked in here in the last 24 hours that would match this description? Nope, 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 nope. All the way down the line, all the way through town. No hotels have seen them. They don't know anything about them. So we're kind of dead in the water again. We're like, dang it, we were getting so close. The bus is coming. Maybe they caught an earlier bus, right? We don't, because there was a couple buses left Show Low or Holbrook. We just were going for the last one. Maybe they caught one earlier in the day and we already missed them. So we're starting to kind of sweat it a little bit and trying to figure out what was going on. Well, we go back to the first hotel. Finally, we make a phone call to the suspect's phone, and he answers it. And I'm like, hey, first of all, I sent a text. And I said, hey, got a new phone, dude. Who are you or whatever? And he doesn't respond. So we start calling the phone. He finally answers it and says, yeah, what's up? And we're like, hey, who is this? I got a new phone, and I'm trying to figure out all my phone contact numbers, and I don't remember who this is. He wouldn't identify himself, so it wasn't helping us. We were actually talking to the guy we thought had this girl, and we couldn't get any information out of him. So we get there, we finally go back to one of the original hotels, and then like, oh, wait, no. Yeah, we do have somebody matching that description. They're in room 205. So me and Toby run down 205, knock on the door opens up, and there she is. So she's sitting there with a 35-year-old guy. We identify Kenneth Brown, he's 35. She's 18 with a 13-year-old mentality. So we start talking to Kenneth, what's going on? Turns out, as we do our investigation, we do our interviews, Kenneth lives in New York State. He had made contact with this girl over a social media app. They started talking, flirting. He convinced her that he was in love with her. And I don't have any money, but I want to come out into Arizona and get you. So she wires him money, unbeknownst to her parents, to New York to buy a bus ticket. He rides on a bus from New York to Holbrook, where then he picks up another ride and comes to Show Low, sneaks to her room at 11 o'clock at night. She sneaks out the window, and he leaves with her. She thought, this guy's in love with me. This is great. He's 35 years old. She's 18, and has the mentality of a 13-year-old. But he convinced her, thought this was great. So they met on this online dating app. They've been talking for weeks. They'd been talking for weeks, and her parents had no idea. And it's not because they weren't active parents. They monitored her. They watched her. They tried to figure out what was going on. But she's smart. They're kids. They do these things. They did this. She did it on the backside. She would talk to him after hours when everybody was in bed. He was convincing her to send pictures, and all these things were going on. And her parents, being very diligent, very studious parents, had no idea. But they weren't as involved as what we're, like April's saying, get into those apps, get those passwords, and figure this kind of stuff out. So she wires him the money. He snuck her out of the room. They immediately, first thing he did, took her straight to a hotel and attempts to have sex with her. First thing he does, very first thing he does. Leaves that hotel, goes to another hotel, does the exact same thing. Right off the bat. He doesn't even pass go, doesn't anything. He just picks her straight up, straight to a hotel. So clearly that's his intention. So he does that. Then he travels to Holbrook. They get another hotel where he's trying to do it again. This is all within about 12 hours. And this is a young girl who doesn't really know what's going on, and he's 35. So as we start talking to her, I'm interviewing this young girl, and I'm asking her, how well do you know this guy? Oh, I know him pretty well. We've been talking for weeks. He's great. I think he's going to take care of me. He's going to take me home. We're going to live with his sister. She had all these great ideas of what life was going to be like with this guy, right? So while we're standing there talking to him, we start doing our research as cops, and we start running background checks and trying to figure out, who is this guy? What's he up to? Turns out he's done this before. He was arrested in Florida with a 13-year-old girl a couple of years prior that he had snuck out of the house and was living on the streets with her for, I think, a week before they found her. And they only found her because her parents had reported her missing. her picture ended up on the TV, and somebody staying in a local hotel recognized, hey, that's the girl in the room next to me. So he gets arrested, and they rescued the girl. He gets arrested, but he doesn't do much time. Turns out he's a drug offender. He's been arrested for cocaine and all kinds of drug offenses, trespassing, marijuana offenses. He's been arrested several times, but he's not done much time in jail. His charge in Florida was kidnapping of this 13-year-old girl. That's what he was arrested and charged with. But he kind of skated on some of those charges, ended up with very little jail time and some probation, moves to New York, and finds another girl online to do the same thing all over again. And so while we're talking to this young girl, we share this information with her. Here's who he really is. And it's still very much a case that it was very important for me at the time, because it was a great case. I mean, we really saved somebody. The minute I broke the news to her about who this guy was, she literally broke down bawling, started crying, and she asked me, is it okay if I hug a police officer? And she's hugging me and holding on to me because she realized, holy cow, I almost got on a bus and went all the way across the country with a guy I didn't even know anything about. And after seeing his history and seeing what he's up to, there is no doubt in my mind to this day, no question, that she was not going to be living with him as his wife, right? He's going to pick her up, use her for what he wants, and then he's either going to be selling her on the street, or she's going to end up a prostitute on the street because she's in New York. She can't get back home. She was afraid of her dad being mad at her. She was afraid she was in trouble. She was afraid to call her dad when I found her and said, hey, we need to call your dad. He's worried sick. We want him to know you're safe. And she was like, I am afraid I'm going to get in trouble. So I had to call dad and said, Dad, I used her phone to call dad so that he saw her number pop up, and he was ecstatic. I mean, he was bawling on the phone. He's crying because he was so glad that we found her. But she absolutely was going to be trafficked. There's no question in my mind. That's what he does. He picks up girls, he moves them, takes them across the country, and that's what he does. So unfortunately for us in law enforcement, we could do nothing to him, nothing. Technically, she's 18. She can make those choices. But he knows, too, that she's 18, and she can make those choices. So we could do nothing to him. We could not arrest him. He had not broken any laws. All we could do was say, you need to get on a bus and get back to New York City, because I don't want to see you in my state. And that's what he did. He took his bus ticket, he got on the bus, and he left. We were able to put her in our car and take her home. And it was a very emotional drive all the way home. She was so upset. She was crying. She didn't realize the trouble she had gotten herself into. And all started on a social media app. This whole thing started on a social media app. We literally worked that case for almost 12 hours straight, nonstop, 6 detectives, to find her in Holbrook. She was 45 miles away, but it took us 12 hours to find her. Imagine if they really don't want to get picked up. Imagine if they keep that phone turned off. And our pimps and the people that are doing this to our kids are getting better at hiding themselves. They're getting better at burner phones. They'll use a phone, and then they toss it, and they get a new phone. And then they use that one, and they toss it. And they change cities. Every time they change cities, they change phones. And so tracking these people is getting more and more hard. This particular guy wasn't that experienced yet, but he's getting there, and he's getting harder to track. It was harder to find her than it probably was the first girl that he had picked up, right? Because we didn't have anything to work with. So they found her, and we got her home, and to this day, the best case I ever worked, and to this day, that was the most eye-opening experience to me as to what's going on our social media apps. That's what took place. Started just simple, hey, what's up? That's how this whole thing started, was a hey, what's up message from him to her on social media, and before you know it, he's roped her in, got her thinking that all these things are great, life is going to be good, I'm going to take you to my sister's, we're going to live happily ever after, and we catch her in Holbrook on a bus with a guy who's been arrested for kidnapping a 13-year-old, he's a drug addict, and all these things go on. The thing about social media is you can be anybody you want to be on social media, right? I can be anybody I want when I'm on that computer. You don't have to know anything about me. I can pretend to be anybody, and I can convince, and some of these people I can convince that I am who I say I am. And until somebody like we were fortunate enough that day to show up and get a name and a DOB and run his record and identify what kind of person he was, otherwise they would never have known. And had we not got that call that day and followed our gut and said, let's figure this out, she would have ended up in New York, and I don't know that she would have ever come home. I honestly don't know. My personal feeling is she would not have come home. So there's resources out there, and sex trafficking is a big deal. It is happening in our community, and it seems like a huge thing. And ultimately, this is a scary story, but the bottom line is it's a win, because we learned, they learned, we got her, and we got her home. But not every agency is going to have the resources, the manpower, the support of their command staff to say, you know what, that was a day, there was a big event going on within the entire city. They were taking a picture of the entire city, and everybody has to be there. It's a mandatory thing. Well, guess who's not in the picture? Detective Gilmore and I. Because my command staff said, that picture is not worth you taking 5 minutes from this case. Work this case, find this girl, and we found her. So we have, but not every agency can dedicate those kind of resources. Not every agency has the relationship we have with Navajo County that sent me 2 more detectives, or my county attorney's office that sent an investigator. Some people just say, hey, it is what it is. She's 18. I'm not going to do anything about it. She can run away if she wants to run away. She can leave if she wants. Well, that's not the way we felt, and we worked it. So I think it was really good. It worked out really well, but it all started on social media. So when April starts talking about the tools that you can use to monitor your kids, take that serious. Take it very serious, and do what you can to protect your kids online, because it's happening. And we're seeing it all the way down at the 6th grade level. I've been the supervisor of SROs, our school resource officers, and they see it. They're seeing it at 6th grade. So it's happening. And we're going to, at the end, there's a resource packet in the back, and the resources are going to be available, and there's some websites there from NCMEC and different websites that help you find this information. So I'm going to turn it back over to April at the end. If there's any questions on anything that I know from the law enforcement perspective or anything, please feel free to come up and ask me questions. Like I said, the cameras will be off, and we'll be able to talk a little more openly.
Okay, so that was probably really eye-opening, because it was to me when I learned all this. These are conversations that we just need to be having with our children. You can go home and tell your children that you learned that this happened in our town. So did everybody get a handout? There's some up here. I'll pass more out in a minute. So I want to leave you with some tools that you can take home. One of my favorite places to go to learn more about social media apps, it's called smartsocial.com. And so you'll see that it has like a green, yellow, red for all of our social media apps. The green doesn't mean that I think these are awesome apps and let your kids be on them, because they're great. I don't like them either. But the green apps were made in the United States. And so if something scary happens, it's easier for law enforcement to get into those apps, because they were made here. The yellow and the red, those apps were made in different countries, Canada, all over the world. If something scary happens and law enforcement tries to get involved, it takes months usually for those apps to get back to law enforcement, and by then, months down the road, it's too late. The red apps, I wish that Snapchat was in the red app, but it's not. That's okay. So in the red apps, you'll see there's a calculator app is one of the apps. It looks like a regular calculator. It works like a regular calculator. Your kids put in a certain math problem, up pops the dark web, where they are trading drugs and sex and all kinds of scary things. So that's an example of, you can put all these monitors on your children's phone. You can do the safety apps. And you should do those things. And you should have the central charging station and all these things. But that is an example of the fact that you are your child's best app, because they will find their way around anything. Once we turn the cameras off, we can talk a little bit about Apple finally came out with something for iPhones where you can turn off your kid's phone at a certain time of the night until the morning. And our kids have found a way. It's such an easy way that they have found around that. We can talk about that in our Q&A. So smartsocial.com. These are more things that are available to us that have to do with what Sergeant Hart was talking about. These are all on the flyer, so I'm just going to blow through these because time is short. So here's my challenge. Establish a family digital plan. Manage and verify usage. Install parental controls. Schedule no phone times as a family. 5 to 8 p.m. is a great time that there is a media basket in your home. Everybody puts all devices in that basket, even you. And you have eye-to-eye contact with your family, with your children. Increase outdoor activity. Hug your kids. Give them eye contact. They are craving that. And we're not giving it to them. Have monthly tech talks. This is not a one and done. This has to be monthly. Implement a central charging station. That's my favorite. And above all, lead by example. Take a step back. Look at your cell phone habits. What do you need to change? Your children are watching you. So, and then it's what I always say, don't do nothing just because you can't do everything. This feels super overwhelming. This was a lot of information tonight, a lot of hard conversations, scary stories. But there's little things that we can do that make a big difference, like the things that I went over. And you do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you do better. We just haven't known until now. The studies are just starting to come out. And so now we're educating ourselves. And so now we can go home and we can do better.